Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. This one I'm looking at what the ultimates can do in PvE content. This video is a little late unfortunately, so you probably have a good idea of what the characters can do. Regardless, I'll show you the kind of improvement you should be expecting if you get the character's newest uniform and or upgrade them to T3 or transcend them. I also have some pretty solid skill rotations that I was messing around with, and obviously will recommend builds for the characters if you do want to use them in PvE. I think the general consensus is that the ultimates aren't really that great for PvE and they fell kind of flat with this update. I could easily say that the upgrades on the PvP side were pretty solid, and you would already know that if you saw my last video. If you didn't see it and you want to check it out, a link should pop up somewhere around here that should take you directly there. But yeah, anyways, I'll try to be a little bit more brief with this video so it doesn't get too long looking over all the characters and uniforms. Here are what my card stats look like. I do not have 25% pierce, but I do have 110-ish physical damage and around 130% energy damage. And since I have a 20% proc or damage proc for both, that means that goes up to 130 physical and 150 energy. I don't know what your card stats may look like, but these are mine, so the way that the characters perform will give you a general idea of how they might perform for you. The first character that I'm looking at is Blue Marvel, and although his kit for the uniform is designed for PvP, he does decently in PvE as well. Unfortunately, he doesn't have all defense down that ignores immunity, so he might struggle on some World Boss Ultimate bosses, and from what I noticed, the Mockery effect doesn't work on World Boss Ultimate or World Boss Legend bosses. In addition to this, since World Boss Ultimate and World Boss Legend bosses don't have debuff removal, then Blue Marvel doesn't benefit from the 30% increased damage to debuff removal characters or the 30% from the Mockery. The one exception to this is Thanos, since once you get under 11 bars, he always has the debuff removal permanently active. So that means you'll always get the 30% increased damage to all your allies, and you can use Blue Marvel as a support in that sense. One factor that I found makes Blue Marvel decent for PvE, not amazing, but decent, is that a lot of his skills have a low cooldown. So by the time that you T3 him, you can fill up that T3 meter pretty quickly. You can't really cancel and layer his skills. The fifth is the one exception to this that I found. So with that in mind, I would probably say if you're going to build him for PvE, then a CTP of Rage is your best bet. In terms of the rotation that you can use, the one that I found worked most effectively was using 5 and instantly canceling into your 3, waiting for that to finish, and then going into your 4th skill and waiting for that to finish. So basically 5 cancel 3, 4, and then you use 1 and 2 filler and you just repeat this. The reason for doing this is because he has a self buff on his 5th and 3rd skill, which you want to use before you go into your 4th skill, which will be your main damage dealing skill. With no damage proc and Groot as the only striker for the heals, I finished the fight with 49 seconds to spare. Using the same setup, unfortunately I can't take down Cull Obsidian, since like I mentioned, he doesn't have all defense down, and that really shows when you're fighting these world bosses. That said, I wasn't too far off and got a little bit past 4 bars before time ran out. After doing those 2 tests, the only thing left to do is upgrade Blue Marvel to T3 to see how much better he performs in those specific 2 fights. If you do decide to T3 Blue Marvel and are wondering what kind of rotation to use, the one that I went with is 5, cancel 3, and then wait about a second or so in that skill for you to see the damage proc being up, then immediately cancel into your 4th skill and cancel into the 6th skill. You can instant cancel the 3rd skill after you use the 5th, but I recommend to wait just a little bit to get the full use of your damage proc if you're using a rage. Also, I mentioned that you should cancel into your 4th skill before going into your ultimate. You don't really have to do that because I found that the ultimate skill has a 100% damage increase for one skill, so it overrides the one from the 4th skill if you're trying to carry it over into the ultimate skill. If you're only working with a single skill damage proc, you can cancel the 4th skill and get that 100% damage increase to one skill to another skill. So you could do something like 4 instant cancel into your 5th or your 3rd, but by doing so you're going to delay the charge up for your ultimate skill and those skills won't really last the full 5 seconds, so you're not going to get the full benefit of using a single skill damage proc. You can see how much better he gets when he has that T3 available, especially since, like I said, the skills have a short cooldown for him, so you can rotate through them fairly quickly and get that T3 up frequently. With that T3 skill and the stat bump, I finished 1 minute and 22 seconds faster than before. For Call Obsidian, I get just below the 4 health bar mark in about 1 minute and 50 seconds left, and then finish the fight completely just 25 seconds after that with 1 minute and 25 seconds left. America Chavez is the next character that I'm looking at, and in terms of PvP, she doesn't have too much going for her. Her damage seems a little bit on the low side, and the majority of your skill rotation is basically going to be around using the 4th and the 5th skill. I don't really think you would want to use a single skill damage proc with her like a CTP of energy, since she doesn't have many skills that can be cancelled and layered on top of one another. In fact, from the testing that I did, there wasn't any skills that I saw that could be cancelled and have their damage persist. Due to that, if you wanted to use her for PvE, then you would more than likely have to go with a CTP of Rage. If you go with that build, then you generally want to use the 4th skill first and let that play out fully, and then use the 5th skill and do the same. So essentially your rotation will be 4, 5, and then you would use the 3, 2, and 1 as filler while the damage proc is still up. The reason that you want to go with the 4th skill first is to get the damage buff to all skills up, and then have that active for your 5th skill, which also has an additional self buff too. You can see her damage isn't the greatest, since I only got to about 9.5 bars remaining before time ran out. Another reason why I said to use the 4th skill first is because it has all defense down that ignores immunity, and goes up to a total of 50%. If you're fighting world boss ultimates with the exclusion of Thanos, then it's really beneficial to use the 4th skill first for the all defense down before you go into your hardest hitting skill, which is your 5th. Even still, my outcome for this fight was the same as last one. I got to 9.5 bars before time ran out. The stat bump that Chavez gets for transcending is pretty decent and makes her better in PvE, but I still think her greatest strength, or where she'll shine the most, is in PvP. Once you have her awakened, the rotation that you can use is 4, 6, cancel, 5. One of the good things about the 6th skill for all of the awakened characters that are in the group, so that would be Chavez, Spectrum, and Quasar, is that you can instantly cancel the skill and get the full damage out of it. With no damage proc and Groot as the only striker, you can see that I'm still not able to finish this stage even with the Transcended upgrade, but I am however able to do 6 more bars of damage in the same amount of time. From the general testing that I've done over these multiple different updates that have come out in the past, I've found out that characters that can complete stage 50 with no damage proc generally have a pretty good PvE capability, especially if they can finish the stage with 2 or so minutes remaining. Sadly, that's not the case for America Chavez, since she doesn't even really come close to completing stage 50. You can see that same outcome in the Proxima test, since she finished almost identically to the Thanos test. Quasar, on the other hand, got a lot of tools to work with for PvE, and is also really strong in PvP. Her newest uniform gave her 20% chain damage on her uniform passive, 40% ignore dodge on her tier 2 passive, which is really good for bosses that have high dodge values like Corvus, and Mephisto and Knull as world boss legend bosses. She also got all defense down that ignores immunity on her 3rd skill, and damage accumulation for damage dealt on her 5th skill. To add to this, unlike America Chavez, most of Quasar's skills can be cancelled and the damage will still persist afterwards. I didn't mention any changes to the 4th skill, but it did get a lot of hits added to it. Because so many of her skills can be insta-cancelled, it seems like she was designed for CTP of energy, though you could, I guess, use a CTP of Rage if you want to use those 1 and 2 fillers as well. But between the two, I would probably go with an energy due to all the increased number of hits on her skills. For this particular test, I'm not using a damage proc and have the same setup as I did with Chavez, which is only Groot as a striker. There isn't one definitive skill rotation for Quasar if you have a single skill damage proc, but the one that I went with is 3, cancel 4, cancel 5. If you cancel the skills quick enough, you'll still get the full hits out of them and still manage to proc on the 5th skill. Since I didn't use a damage proc for my testing, I can't say exactly if this rotation will land reliably on the 5th skill. So another alternative that you could use is you do 3, cancel 5, delay cancel once you hit the ground, and go into your 4th skill. Another alternative is to use the 5th skill and then delay cancel after you hit the ground into your 3rd skill, cancel into your 4th skill. I doubt that these would be better rotations, but I'm mentioning them anyway in case you want to try them out and it works better for you. Regardless of which rotation you go with, there's no denying that Quasar's new uniform makes her a usable character now. She went from only doing Shadowland to be able to do stage 50 of Thanos with no damage proc. And I did that with 43 seconds still remaining. Unfortunately, the damage versus call was still a bit lacking, and I wasn't able to finish. I only got to about 4.5 bars before time ran out. Fortunately, I have the option of awakening and then transcending Quasar, so I can make up that damage to be able to finish stage 99 of call. Once you awaken Quasar, one of the rotations you can use to proc safely on the 5th skill is 6, cancel 3, cancel 4, cancel 5. Or if you're concerned about getting that damage accumulation up right away, another option for a rotation is you do 5, delay cancel after you hit the ground, and then 6, cancel 3, cancel 4. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of variations to the rotations that you can use, but if you use these other variations, the 5th is going to be weaved in there somewhere, and it does have an initial hit, so there's a chance that it ruins the skill that you want to proc on. With the Transcended Quasar, I finished stage 50 of Thanos 56 seconds faster than before. On the call fight, I got to the same point, the 4.5 bars, a minute and 42 seconds faster, and then finished the fight completely with 33 seconds remaining. Black Panther's newest uniform got a little bit of a lukewarm response from PvE-centered players. It seems like the general consensus for this uniform from the community is that although it's good, it could have been a lot better. And although I do agree with that to some regard, it feels like many people have outright dismissed this uniform just because it isn't top 2, 3, or 5 in PvE or PvP. And that's really unfortunate because the uniform alone, even though it's not meta breaking, is a really solid upgrade for the character. In order to show you how much better the uniform makes him, I'm obviously testing his old uniform first versus Thanos. As you can see, I wasn't able to finish the fight with the old uniform, and mind you, this is with a damage proc build, i.e. a CTP of Destruction. His newest uniform adds way more hits on the majority of his skills and a lot of raw damage. Most notably, he gets a 50% guaranteed crit rate on his tier 2 passive, which is in line with Wolverine's, and it's a really high value. And then on his 3rd skill, he gets damage accumulation for damage dealt, and on his 5th skill, he gets a self damage buff. He doesn't get any all defense down that ignores immunity, but the raw damage and the number of hits he gets upgraded on his skills actually makes up for that, and you'll see that in the next test where I fight Proxima. His ultimate loses a self damage buff, which was placed on the 5th skill, and it gains 10 additional hits on it. I think this is the predominant area that PvE players were dissatisfied with the uniform upgrading, since adding 10 hits to the ultimate that wasn't really that great didn't really change it up at that much. In a future uniform, it would be nice if the hits were almost doubled, so it currently has 30 hits. Going to 60 seems reasonable, since other ultimates, I believe, go up to 40 or 50, even 55 hits. If the number of hits isn't increased, then the raw damage on the skill needs to be increased, or a damage buff that applies just to the ultimate needs to be put in. It's also a little unfortunate that the dev team didn't play around a little bit and apply some thematic mechanics to the character. For example, in the movie, the character can accumulate damage and kind of reflect it back, so reflecting physical damage isn't that far-fetched. The character is also known for being stealthy, so adding invisibility to his kit also seemed like a reasonable addition. Besides this, one of the mechanics that people kind of expected, since Black Panther can heal at an accelerated rate, was a simple heal in one of his skills. The majority of the things that I mentioned here are more on the PvP side, I guess. So if they wanted to improve his damage even further, the thing that they can do is increase the value of the crit damage that he gets when he crits. So in his current uniform, he can go past the 200% crit damage because his passive now gives him a 100% chance to get 10% additional crit damage after he crits. If they wanted to increase his damage, all they would have to do is increase that 10% to a higher value. For reference, this mechanic or skill on most characters is 30% chance to get 100% additional crit damage when critting. It's a lower chance to get that crit damage, but the crit damage that you get is massive. Finding a better medium between those two, I think, would provide a better trade-off. But regardless of all those expectations, saying that the newest uniform is bad or not worth getting is really selling it short. As you saw at the end of the last clip, I was able to take down Thanos stage 50 with 3 minutes and 17 seconds left. I also got to the same 5 health bar mark, 3 minutes and 40 seconds faster with this uniform. If you ask me, that's a really significant upgrade, and it easily makes him usable in the current level of content. As you can see from this test, I'm not even able to finish Proxima with the old uniform, and the time runs out with about 6 bars left. Before I show how much better he does with his newest uniform on Proxima with no all defense down, I'll briefly cover some of the builds that you can use and the skill rotation that I found works really well for me. Due to the fact that you can cancel, or rather delay cancel, the 4th skill, and that he has an increased number of hits on his skills now, means that it lends really well to something like a CTP of energy or a single skill damage proc. I personally went with a CTP of destruction because I want some use out of him in PvP, not necessarily in timeline, but in Alliance Conquest he can take down meta characters pretty quickly with a good proc. In terms of the rotation, the one that I found worked really well for me and that I tested frequently was that you do 3 cancel, 4 delay cancel after you see 2 hits, and then go into your 5th. Fortunately, you might proc a little bit early on the 3rd skill, so it's a little bit of up in the air the first time you use it, but if you can land it correctly, then the rest of the fight you'll be landing it correctly, since the cooldown on the skills align really well with the proc. In other words, he's actually pretty proc friendly. So for a full rotation to keep cycling well on the proc, you would do 3 cancel, 4 delay cancel after 2 hits, go into your 5th skill, and then afterwards you immediately press the 1st skill and then use the 2nd skill. You can cancel out of the 1st skill to go into the 2nd skill, and you want to let that play out as long as you can before your other skills come up. The reason for this is that if you're fighting other bosses besides Thanos and World Boss Legend bosses, the 2nd skill applies a paralysis, which will help keep the bosses in place and guarantee your damage from the other skills. After you've done 3 cancel, 4 delay cancel, 5, and then 1 cancel 2. Once your skills are back up, you would do 5 cancel, 3 cancel, 4 delay cancel into your ultimate. We do this variation the 2nd time around because by doing the 5th skill first, you get that damage buff up, then you use the 3 to get the accumulation, and then the 4 to get the damage from that skill. And by using those 3 skills, your ultimate will be filled up and then you can use it. After that, you'd go back to the regular rotation, and then you'd go to the 2nd rotation after the 1st rotation. By doing this, I was able to get to the 6 health bars 3 minutes and 40 seconds faster, and then finish the fight completely 20 seconds after that. Can other characters finish faster than this? Yeah, they might be able to. But saying that this upgrade wasn't good enough is a little bit of a stretch, in my opinion. Like I mentioned before, the uniform has room for improvement, but if he can do what I showed in PvE, and he can also get away with things like this in PvP, the upgrade is indeed good overall, and well worth it for the people that want to use this character. In a similar fashion, I believe people were expecting a little bit more from the new Captain Marvel uniform as well, such as something like a self-heal, or even damage accumulation, or I guess at the very least, all defense down that ignores immunity. Sadly, she didn't get any of these, but she did get a raw damage increase to most of her skills. The number of hits didn't really increase from what I saw. They seemed consistent with the previous uniform, even for the ultimate skill. For the most part, she became a lot tankier and has a higher overall damage versus villains now. She also became a little bit easier to play since you don't have to rely on using the 5th skill and having that up to have additional hits on your skills. With the newest uniform, that feature or mechanic is removed entirely, and you can have full hit count for all of your skills regardless of whether you use the 5th first or not. If they really wanted to make her damage kind of crazy, what they could do is make the 5th skill cancelable while the damage can still be applied. The same could be also said for her ultimate skill. Sadly, that's one of the greatest setbacks to her kit as a whole, is that you can't cancel any of her skills, and you basically just have to go through them one at a time, usually being the 3rd and the 4th for the most part. In the current tests that I did, I'm using a CTP of Destruction on Captain Marvel, and I'm able to complete stage 50 of Thanos with the old uniform with 1 minute and 19 seconds remaining. In terms of builds that you can use for PvE, it's pretty straightforward that you would go with a Rage, since you can't cancel her skills to make the most out of a single skill damage proc. If you did want to go with a little bit of a hybrid to have some strength in PvP, you could also try out a Greed. I've heard pretty good things about it, and I've also personally used a CTP of Rage at the moment and have done really well in PvP as well. So going with something like a CTP of Greed that also has the guard break immunity and the little bit of heal would probably make her even better in the PvP side. But if you're going straight for PvE, then a Rage is the way to go. If you don't have any of those and are still using a CTP of Destruction, that's perfectly fine as well. Just note that if you're using her for PvE, you'll obviously have a lower kind of ceiling for her. If you're curious about a rotation, if you're using a single skill damage proc, you'd basically want to proc on the 3rd skill and then use the 4th for filler before the proc is up again to go into your 3rd skill. In essence, you basically just want to spam the 5th and 4th until you get your proc back up or ready to go into your 3rd skill. You also want to cancel the 2nd skill somewhere in this spam, since it does give you a damage buff to your character. So a rotation that you could possibly use would be something like 2 cancel 3 and proc on the 3rd skill, then use the 4th skill, let that play out and possibly go into a bit of the 5th skill, and then cancel 1 and 2 immediately before your proc is ready and go into your 3rd skill again, and just repeat that. If you're using a Rage, however, the 2 skills that you want to have inside that proc duration is your 3rd and 4th skill. The rotation that I messed around with a Rage build that worked really well for me is you do 5 cancel 2 cancel 1 and then go into your 3rd skill. The proc should be up at that point, so you'll be hitting the 3rd skill with the proc up, and then go into your 4th skill and let that play out as well. Once the proc is down, you basically repeat the same thing, do 5 cancel 2 cancel 1 or any kind of mix of those skills so that you fill up your ultimate faster. Once you have your ultimate, you can do 5 cancel 2 cancel into your ultimate, and then by the time you fall down and you see the little meteors coming down, you can cancel and go into your 3rd skill and then again into your 4th skill. In this way, you can layer some of the damage from the ultimate skill by being able to delay cancel it. I am using a CTP of Destruction for these tests, and you can see that with the newest uniform, I'm able to complete the same stage 53 seconds faster. With the previous uniform, I actually ran out of time versus Call, though if I tightened up the rotation or procs a little bit better, I'm pretty sure I could have finished the fight, but basically with no time remaining. With the newest uniform, even though the character didn't get any all defense down that ignores immunity, the ultimate, for example, only has all defense down and not the one that ignores immunity, but regardless, because of the damage increase or the raw damage applied to the skills, you can see that I was able to complete the same fight 1 minute and 45 seconds faster than before. The last character that I'm looking at is Spectrum, and in terms of her PvE performance, she seems to fall in line somewhere between Quasar, and Chavez. From what I saw in her kit, she doesn't seem to be able to push as high as Quasar in certain levels, but she doesn't fall as low as Chavez. The main tools that she has for PvE are the capability of going past the 200% crit damage cap on her tier 2 passive. She also has damage accumulation for damage dealt on her 3rd skill, all defense down that ignores immunity on her 4th skill, and a self-damage buff on her 5th skill. In addition to this, her tier 1 passive also gives her an all damage buff, but it activates when she's hit. On top of this, her 4th and 5th skill can be delayed cancelled, and that usually helps in PvE content when a character can load a lot of skills on top of one another. Unfortunately, her raw damage isn't too high, so it seems like she's kind of set up to get a uniform in the future that might make her really good. The build that I have on her doesn't use a damage proc, and I'm using the same testing conditions as I did for Quasar and Chavez. That said, for her, I wasn't able to complete stage 50 of Thanos and was about 4.5 bars away from finishing before time ran out. Sadly, the same case was also true versus Knull. Due to his higher defenses, I actually finished a bit further behind, with time running out with me having about 8 bars remaining. If you really want to use Spectrum in PvE content, it's more than ideal that you awaken her. Without upgrading her and with no uniform available, her damage falls a little bit behind, and you really kind of need that awakening to do anything significant with her. For the kinds of builds that you can go for, you do have an option of using a CTP of energy, since I mentioned you can layer on the skills, but unfortunately the majority of the skills that she has have to be delayed cancel, which don't really lend too well to single skill damage proc, because any one of those skills that needs to be delayed cancel might trigger the proc on the skill that you don't want. What I'm basically trying to say is that she doesn't seem to be proc friendly, and a CTP of Rage might be a lot easier to use and more than likely better. One of the skill rotations you could try with a single skill damage proc, though I don't think it would be that great, would be to use the 5th skill and then you delay cancel it after the meteor shots kind of start appearing. Then you go into your 4th skill and then you cancel that after you see the electric kind of AoE going in circle, and then you go into your 3rd skill. If you have your awakening skill available, you would do the same rotation, but before going into your 3rd skill, you would use your 6th skill and just cancel it into your 3rd. Like I said, I don't really think this is a good rotation, and she would work a lot better with the CTP of Rage and this rotation that I'm going to mention now. So if you do go with a Rage, I think the more ideal rotation would be that you use your 3rd skill and let that play out fully, and then use your 4th skill and you cancel once the electricity starts arcing around. Then you would go into your 5th skill and you would cancel that once the meteors start shooting down. Then you would do your 1st skill, let that play out, and go into your 2nd skill. This rotation basically lets you have the 3rd skill up first to get that damage accumulation, and then the proc would be active on her hardest hitting skills, which would be the 4 and the 5, more so the 5. And in that period of time, you will also have used the 1st and 2nd skill while that damage proc is up, making full use of it. If you have her awakened, you would do the same rotation, except right after the 3, you would use your 6th skill and cancel it instantly into the other skills. You can see that with this upgrade, I was able to reach that 4.5 health bar mark, 1 minute and 41 seconds quicker, and then finish the fight completely just 33 seconds after that. For Call Obsidian, on the other hand, I reached that 8 health bar mark 1 minute and 42 seconds quicker than before after getting the awakening, but sadly she still didn't have enough damage to finish the fight, and time ran out with 3.5 health bars left. To get a better idea of the raw damage for these characters in PvE content, I took them into World Boss Legend, and for the Knull fight I tweaked the teams so that they would get the most from the leaderships and supports. With no damage proc, Blue Marvel finishes the fight with 33 seconds remaining. Chavez, on the other hand, I wasn't able to even get close to completing stage 9 of Knull, so I had to lower it down to stage 4. I managed to finish that fight with 39 seconds remaining, though if I upped the stage to maybe 5 or 6, I might have been able to get away with a win on that. Still, you can see that she is the lowest of the group in terms of PvE potential. Quasar, on the other hand, got a really solid upgrade with her uniform since I was able to complete stage 9 of Knull and finished it about 5 seconds faster than Blue Marvel with 38 seconds remaining. Spectrum is better than Chavez, but it doesn't seem like she's as good as Quasar, at least without a uniform. Even by using her own amazing leadership, which has energy damage and ignore dodge, as well as 2 support characters, I was still behind Quasar's finish time by 27 seconds, but I was still able to finish stage 9 of Knull. With a less than ideal build for PvE, my CTP of Destruction Captain Marvel was able to take down Knull with 55 seconds remaining. And then this was for Black Panther. I'm showing this part of the clip because I want to highlight how good his burst damage is now with that combo that I said. Using the 5th skill, 3rd skill, and then 4th skill and going into your ultimate, he does about 11 bars of damage, at least for my cards, and a CTP of Destruction on stage 9 of Knull. If you use a CTP of Energy instead and go full PvE for him, then this performance is even better since that chain hit damage really adds up. Even though his damage might not be top 5, I still think this uniform is really good, and it's also really fun to play. Hopefully they can maybe tweak it just a little bit in a mid-month patch or something like that, but even if they don't, it's a really solid upgrade for him. With all that said, I finished the stage with 2 minutes and 35 seconds remaining. So to summarize the upgrade improvement that each character got, I made an infographic. From the infographic, you can see that Black Panther easily takes the top spot for most improved with his uniform. His level of improvement completely topples the other characters, beating Thanos a full 3 minutes and 17 seconds faster than he did with his old uniform, and beating Proxima 3 minutes and 40 seconds faster than his previous uniform. You can also see that Chavez also got a pretty big upgrade with her Transcendence, but that doesn't really mean much when she can't complete the world boss ultimate stages that I tested her on. Basically, the next best upgrade would either be Blue Marvel's T3 or Spectrum's Awakening / Transcendence. Though I think you'd probably get more value out of Blue Marvel's T3 ability since he's more usable or meta in a sense in PvP content. After that, Quasar and Captain Marvel are pretty much on par with their upgrade, and like the previous character comparison with Blue Marvel and Spectrum, Captain Marvel has a little bit more value throughout the game, so you probably might want to go with her upgrade before Quasar's. And that rounds out this video for the Ultimates update. I know the PvE review was a little bit late, so sorry for that, and to make up for it on the future patches, I'm going to do an initial reaction or first impressions video before I do the PvP and PvE thorough breakdown videos. Hopefully that'll give people who are hyped up on the update a little bit of an idea of how the characters have changed in it. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please consider liking or sharing it. It would help grow my channel and make more content for you guys. Thanks for your time and watching, but the video is now over.